So Georgia, it's a complete gerrymander, complete statewide gerrymander, and that's very obvious when you look at these maps and if you look at the percentage of seats. Because as we know, 2020 something historic happened, and 2021. Georgia elected Democrats. Georgia's been a deep red state since the end of the 90s, and it used to be a former Confederate state, and we see a lot of the southern states are very red. If I go back to the national overview, and we go to the old maps, if it'll load, you see a lot of red down here. Now you see these big blue districts, but that's just one district. That's the thing. And that's mandated by the Voting Rights Act. And I believe passed in the late 50s, where they have to have a majority-minority district based on the percentage of people of color in each state. I think it specifically targets southern states or former Confederate states. I'm not sure the exact wording of the law, but basically the reason Mississippi, Tennessee, Alabama, South Carolina all have these blue blobs is because of the Voting Rights Act, because otherwise their GOP state legislators would probably crack it and there would be no Democratic seats. But Georgia has much more Democratic support than other states, and we saw 2020 it flipped for a Democratic president for the first time since Bill Clinton. We saw the runoff elect 2 Democratic senators for the first time since Bill Clinton. And in the later 2021 election, Georgia elected the most Democrats. It was the most Democratic flips out of any state for the local races. So Georgia is very blue. It's almost half. It's about 49% or 48% Democratic voters, somewhere in there. About 51% Republican, and then the other Libertarian or whatever. And so the fascist state legislator, which I will say that if you have looked into Georgia, the recent things starting in the end of 2020 to now, state legislators really going down a very bad fascist path, and that's not an exaggeration. But this old map, you see we have, this is what I consider the voting rights district, because these are just urban Atlanta districts. This blue district here, Sanford Bishop's district, Georgia's 2nd, is what I consider Georgia's voting rights district, because this is this right here where I'm hovering my cursor. I hope you can see. You can see my cursor, right? Yeah, you can see my cursor. Is what's called the Black Belt, and it's called that because this is where a lot of rural, not all rural, but it's where a lot of black Georgians live. And there's clear segregation in Georgia, and you see this where people live. You have high minority populations in the Atlanta metro area, and then you have high minority populations in this strip starting down here just above the very south of the state, and then going up to Columbus, and then going over to Augusta. You have smaller cities that have minority populations, and then you also have rural areas that have a lot of black farmers that settled there, and decades ago settled there after the ending of slavery, and white people moved north or south, white flight, But you see, this captures on that. This is a lot. This specifically gets Macon, Columbus in there, and a lot of these more rural black folk to have this slightly Democratic district. And then up here in Atlanta, you have 3 safe Democratic districts, and then 2 highly competitive districts. One that's +1 for the Democrats, and one that's +4 for Republicans. That +4 in 2020 flipped to a Democrat, Carolyn Bourdeaux, which Carolyn Bourdeaux, by the way, is one of the most conservative Democrats in the Congress, so not exactly a great thing, but I guess any improvement is an improvement. And, none of these red districts were competitive at all. The most competitive one being Buddy Carter's district by +19. Now, this new map is awful. it specifically gets rid of these competitive districts, which, by the way, competitive districts are core to a democracy that uses a system like this. Gets rid of that. One, it lowers the majority-minority district to +4 instead of +6, making it statistically competitive. I still think Sanford Bishop's going to win re-election, but it's going to be more difficult, especially in the future, to win a Democratic seat here. So this is a possible flip already, because we had 6 to 8, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, 6 to 8 Democrats to Republicans, which I think is representative of Georgia. Based on the split in voting, that makes sense. 6 to 8. This already makes it to where you might lose one in the future by making this district more competitive. And then what they do in the Atlanta metro area is they take what used to be 2 competitive seats, 6 and 7, and they made 7 a safe Democratic seat, and they made 6 a safe Republican seat. So they're no longer competitive. It's going to be a Republican and a Democrat, which takes away a Democratic seat. So now Georgia is 5 to 9. Georgia every year gets more and more Democratic voters, and yet we've just lost a Democratic legislator because of this map. Because it takes North Fulton, which is already kind of conservative, and lumps it into Forsyth County and all the way up into the mountains, right? And it takes what used to be like Gainesville and some of like Johns Creek and puts it all into like Gwinnett. So now we have a situation where there's going to be a primary challenge. Lucy McBath, who represented Georgia's 6th district, is now going to have to run against Carolyn Bourdeaux for the 7th district, which I hope she wins, because Lucy McBath is a good legislator, Carolyn Bourdeaux is not. But we should have both. That would be more representative. You know, Democrats with opposing views and enough Democrats to represent the Democratic voters. But we have a horrible state legislator. If I drew Georgia, it wouldn't look exactly like this, but I devised a system that I feel like would allow me to make some consistent maps to show you what could be fair maps. Because what I would suggest, and what a lot of legislators have suggested, is banning gerrymandering by putting in strict laws about who can draw the maps and what requirements they would have. And so I sort of gave an example of what something like that could be like with independent commissions across the board, which some states do use independent commissions. Some states use congressional bodies, you know. Georgia is one that uses congressional bodies. But this is what it could look like. My system was split the districts, the number of districts, into thirds, and then each third represent a different type of voter. So you have urban, suburban, and rural is what I've done. So I took the most populated cities and gave them a third of the districts, and then added for each state a different way of labeling, like suburban and then rural districts in that. So what I've done here with Georgia is, of course, we have Atlanta has its own district, which is all in Fulton County. It's got all of Atlanta except for the part that technically extends into DeKalb County, and then all of Fulton, right? Safe blue. And then you have Augusta, which Augusta is red, but just slightly. If we look at the numbers here, District 2 on my map is not even a whole percentage point going to the Republican Party. So it's a very, very competitive district. And competitive districts are super important. As we see here, the Augusta district is now the most competitive red district at +17. Augusta district. They don't look at it that way, but that's how I'm looking at it. Right, and then you have, well, actually Augusta's number. No, that's right. And then Columbus. Columbus is what on here is more like the black belt representation. Because of, I did not take, and this was intentional. This is not, like I said, this is not a map of how I would do it if I was the one doing it. This is just an example of what it could be. And I did not follow the Voting Rights Act when drawing these. This is just a hypothetical different world situation. And with the more fair representation, I felt like we wouldn't need that as much. Well, whereas in real life, I feel like the Voting Rights Act stance on gerrymandering is extremely important, even though it's being undermined by the Supreme Court right now. So this district is the Columbus district, and it is just this southwestern border right here. And I tried to make it very competitive and sort of stick with those more black Democratic leaning voters by putting in some up here of like Noonan and putting over here this area of, I don't even know the name of that county, but this area, you know, like right here. Then you have Macon, which is kind of like what a lot of people call Georgia Heartland. And it's fairly red, but not like super duper red. Like you see on here, these are like 35, 20, all that. Like this is like 14 points red, you know. It's never going to flip, but it's at least going to be, it's not going to be a landslide, right? You're not going to be able to elect a Marjorie Taylor Greene in this district. You're going to have to find a Republican that at least pretends to be moderate, right? And, you know, it includes Butts County, it includes, I'll turn on the counties map in a second to show you. And then you have Savannah as the 5th district, which, you know, Savannah typically has a district in Georgia maps anyways. And so I sort of focus on the coast and then sort of really putting it against the southeast. And so when it comes to suburban for Georgia, really all of that I felt like was in the Atlanta metro area. And we have, because of the vote split, we have we have 5 Democratic districts. We've got one for like Cobb County, got one for like Gwinnett and Gainesville. We've got like a North DeKalb, North Fulton district here for Johns Creek, Brookhaven, you know. You've got the rest of DeKalb into like Newton County, Henry County, right? And then you've got the South Fulton district with Douglas County and Clayton County. I feel like this represents all different types of people who live in the Atlanta metro area, basically. And I feel like it represents them well, because as you see, 7 and 10 are competitive. So we have 3 competitive districts, and then 1 semi-competitive district. And the rural districts of Georgia, very similar to actually the rural districts here. If you look at the old map, you have 3 northern districts, right? The new map creates 4, which is, I feel like, not representative, but I feel like the 3 is. So we've got District 14 with like Rome up to the Appalachians. You got District 13 with like Blue Ridge down, just taking up the extra space in here, which is pretty rural in between Atlanta and Augusta, right? Not including Athens, because I feel like that's more represented in the urban district, right? Because it's an urban area. And then this extra middle rural district here with all these counties north of Fulton up to the border. And I'm just going to show you real quick city lines, just so you can see what I'm talking about. Like you have Augusta here, Columbus here, Macon here, Savannah here, Atlanta here. And you can just, I'll zoom in so you can see kind of what cities are in each district. And then I'm just going to show you the counties. So this is the split on counties. We see the Macon district has Fayette County, part of Coweta, Spalding, Pike, Lamar, Upson, Butts, most of Monroe. It's got some of Jasper. Of course, all of Bibb County, all of the one that Warner Robins is in, I don't even remember, down here. I feel like it's pretty good, pretty representative.